Good evening, campers, dreamers, and babysitters, and welcome to our review of Rob Zombie's The Munsters.
Greetings from Transylvania! That's a strange way of saying hello.
Oh, I guess we're gonna have to get used to it.
Alrighty, Luke. So this might have been the first YouTube short to really blow up for us.
Yes, I think so.
It was the trailer reaction I did to this. So
You had a hot take there, sir.
I guess so. I really didn't realize it. I mean, I understood that maybe not as many people would know the backstory that I was privy to about this and how much of a passion project this was for Rob Zombie. But yeah, the Rob Zombie discourse is heavy, man. Like,
Oh, yeah.
We've always talked
Divisive
about it,
guy.
but like, Lord, I did not realize that it reached so deep. You know what I mean? Like, there were a lot of people just giving their opinions, which is great. It made for a lot of fun conversation. Because it's just like, I didn't realize that it was just gonna like stir that up.
Yeah.
But I mean, overall, we've been watching this thing. There have been plenty of stories. We've talked about it a couple times on the Sunday Scaries. I know a big thing was when people found out that this was going to Netflix. But because it just kind of another thing to kind of throw on the pile of like, oh, this is the quality of this film. But I mean, it was kind of always pitched that way from Rob Zombie's statement. So it was always going to be going to Netflix, or it was always going to be direct to DVD kind of streaming stuff. Which, I mean, if you look at his current filmography, that's all he does anymore. Like, nothing really goes to theaters. The only way is like a Fathom Events thing. I think since
Free
30.
from Hell was.
Yeah.
I don't know. Did it have a release in theaters? I remember it coming out on Blu-ray.
No, it didn't have a release in theaters from what I know. Like I said, maybe a Fathom Events thing, but not around here at least. We didn't get a full-blown release. But I mean, yeah, so this has just kind of been something I feel like a lot of people have been waiting to sink their teeth into, very similarly to Jeepers Creepers, in a way where a lot of people were crossing their fingers that it would be good. But I'd say even more for this one, there were a lot of people who were already like, oh, I'm checked out. Like, this does not seem to be where I want it to be.
And like for me, that's where I'm at with this. Like, Rob Zombie is a filmmaker. We've talked about it, like you said, where I feel like I should like Rob Zombie, and he's never hit with me. Where everything that I've watched of his, I kept going into this in the sense where I'll give him another shot. I'll give him another shot, and then I probably after both Halloweens, which I probably shouldn't have given him a shot after the first Halloween, but after that, I've really checked out. I haven't seen Lords of Salem. Three from Hell, I haven't seen. 31. That's one that he's done, right? That I think I've seen a little bit of that one. I've never fully committed to anything after those Halloween films.
Yeah, I have. I've seen everything. So I really did not care for Three from Hell, or 31. I thought that was pretty rough. I was not happy with it at all. Lords of Salem was actually pretty good. I stayed away from that for years until some coworkers of mine, when I was working at the used media store, were pretty adamant that it was pretty solid. So I watched it, and it's not bad. It's definitely a little more nuanced than his usual fare. I mean, it's still a Rob Zombie movie, but you can tell that there's a little bit more of a different take to it. And then, like, with Three from Hell, it's like, I think that for me, kind of replacing Sid Haig with Richard Brake, because unfortunately Sid passed away, it's one of those things where it's like, it does affect the movie for me. I've only seen it one time, and it's just okay. The only one of that trilogy that I really love is House of a Thousand Corpses, and love is like a strong word. But if I had to put it in the grand scheme of Rob Zombie's work, then that's the one that I love. So yeah, I'm not like, it's a lot like how we talked about M. Night Shyamalan with that trailer reaction earlier this week of like, I like his stuff, like I can get into it where it's like, I like the excitement of going to see a Rob Zombie movie because it's just, you don't know what you're going to get. And most of the time it doesn't really work for me, but I still get excited. I mean, the guy always has really different shit. And this, to me, by far is the most different in a way of anything Rob Zombie.
Yeah, this is something that, like, if you didn't tell me this was Rob Zombie going into this film, I wouldn't have picked it out just because he has a usual tone of a lot of things that he does. So this doesn't feel like a Rob Zombie-esque kind of film, and I'm speaking more so about like when he gets into horror, which this one is not horror. It's
It's
kind of.
very much a comedy.
Yes. So this one feels different in that sense. And then, knowing that it is Rob Zombie, you can kind of pick out a few undertones. But again, this feels way different than what we're used to seeing from him.
Oh yeah, and on that count, I mean, I'll just kind of dive in with my opinion. I think that this movie is, and I said this to you before we started, this is almost too faithful to its own detriment.
Yes.
I think that this feels very much like, with those comments and everything, people told me to go back and watch some episodes. So I went and found some. There were some posted on YouTube, people discussing them. And I kind of just got a deep dive into the history of the Munsters a little bit more because it's like I just really didn't have the time with all the content to sit down and dedicate to watching that show. And plus, couldn't find it streaming anywhere. So, it's one of those things where I'm just like, I'm just going to get some history, some backstory to it. And yeah, I think that if you are a Munsters fan, you're going to like at least some elements of this.
Yeah.
Because I think that it is, like I said, it's very faithful. It feels like a 1960s, old television show, or like you had said, I'm not going to take your take, but like you'll get into it because like the way you describe it, I think fits it best.
Yeah. Like for me, I've seen the Munsters, I think on Nick at Night, and I think maybe on TV Land or something like that. So it was never something that I made a point to watch. I think I may have mentioned this on one of the Sunday Scaries. It was always something that was on after something I made a point to watch in terms of reruns. So I never had the love for the Munsters, and this one, um, I haven't seen the Munsters in the better part of a decade, so I don't really have that reference point anymore in terms of how faithful this is. But the comedy does really feel like that original, like how you would say a 1960s sitcom would go, kind of blatant jokes and things. But for me, sitting here in 2022, I can say that I don't feel like everything needs to be transported into current time, where it's like, maybe a 1960s sitcom in terms of that humor and that style should live in the 1960s and not bring it here to 2022, because I don't think that's necessarily going to resonate with a lot of people, especially maybe even an audience that's is used to Rob Zombie's kind of Rob Zombie-esque
Yeah, his
films.
current repertoire. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, and I agree with you. I think that, it is gonna be a divisive film with the Rob Zombie like diehards. But I think like if you are a diehard, then you also know, and I sympathize with him, I think a little more than most because like I understand, I've watched a lot of interviews with him and just like I like to hear his thoughts. I think that he's a really smart guy. I think he understands the niche that he's kind of put himself in over the years, but he embraces it. And I mean, he's like, I kind of get to just make the movies I want to make. And I don't necessarily have to, really bend to anybody's will. And I understand that. Like that's a filmmaker's dream, but he's also such a creative in the sense of like his other projects and things that he pursues. So it's like the fact that this was his, like he's said in the past, his main passion project was to tackle the Munsters because he is such a fan of it. I think I come at it a little softer
Yeah.
than most will because like if you really like want to break down the bones of this is not a great movie. This is not. This is the plot and everything itself takes a long time to really get where it's going. It feels very much just like we're watching scene to scene to scene, and nothing's really developing. And I don't. That's why I say I think this was developed for hardcore Munsters fans because they're already so used to these characters, these portrayals, but these characters. So they're just kind of getting to see stuff that they already know the stories for. So in that
Yeah.
sense, I could see it being more beneficial as someone with a third party like us. It just really feels like it's just kind of doing something until finally something kicks and then the story starts.
And this honestly, what is the runtime like? In
It's
almost
an
an
hour
hour
and
50.
43 minutes.
So, and to me, it really does feel like every bit of that runtime. I kept checking to see what the timestamp was on certain things, and it just kept going and going and going. So it's like for me, it moves a little slower. We talked about Cronenberg in terms of a TV series and how that kind of body horror does it become too much for an audience like this, where you're used to the half-hour sitcom where maybe over an hour in length kind of becomes a little much. I don't know if that was the idea or maybe just the filmmaking style in general, but it did feel really long to me as I was watching this. And going into the actual filmmaking itself, this really does feel like a play almost, where how random channels will have those TV specials to say a live play taking place on television. This really felt like that in terms of performance, the over exaggeration of the colors. I mean, it really does feel like a play.
When you said that, I honestly agreed, and I was like, this should have probably been a stage play. I think that this would have been a lot easier of a sell
Yeah.
because like everybody gets movie and they anticipate this like actual cinematic experience, and it's like that's not really what he presents you with. And you could tell it is a low budget film. I mean, Rob Zombie doesn't get mega ultra big budgets. So, but I think that they spend it pretty nicely here
Yeah.
because the prosthetics look great. Herman looks great. All the effects and creatures, not every single one looks great, but there's a segment in here that sticks out of my mind. I'm sure you laughed at this too, where I guess it's not really a spoiler because it doesn't really do anything to service the story, but the creature from the Black Lagoon shows up.
Yes. Yep.
And that was cute. As a horror fan, there are going to be references to certain monsters, certain characters that, you see what they're doing and they're really like, tongue in cheek, like, tipping the cap kind of thing. And I appreciate that. Like, that's kind of the fun of watching this movie. But yeah, it just kind of ultimately turns into more of a nothing burger for me, where it's just kind of like, okay, it happened. Like it's not that offensive, but it also didn't really make me be like, "Oh god, like I want more Munsters content." Like this
Yeah,
was
it
great,
was just kind of there. And the way that I describe this is it's an experience film where if I tell you A, B to C, that it's going to mean nothing because nothing really happens here. It has to be the idea here, the charm of the film more so is um, the actual characters themselves going through A, B, and C. So you really have to watch this. Like if I sat someone down and told them the entire plot here, it would feel like a vanilla random film that you could apply to hundreds of different films because there's really nothing here. It really is you have to visually experience what Rob Zombie wants to take you through here with the monsters in order to really achieve any sort of experience. So I think you really have to sit down and watch it. Whether you're going to get anything from it is really up to the viewer because like going into this, as we were talking before we turned on the mics and everything, I had, I guess, a sort of a moment of clarity a little bit, and probably, I don't know, still an hour left in the film where I kind of paused it and was hashing out some of my thoughts, and it was kind of like if I was a kid, 4 or 5, I would have loved this film. The bright colors, all
Mhm.
this stuff would have resonated with me,
It's
and I
very
think that's
goofy, very much like you get all those lovable kind of horror characters.
absolutely. And it's like for me, I think you have this, I know I did, where I grew up kind of different in the sense probably around 6 or 7, I was watching Friday the 13th stuff. So I was really into the hardcore stuff. But 4 or 5, I wasn't necessary. I mean, I could have been, but I don't really remember that type of stuff. Watching it, but it's like I'm coming off of a fresh watch of Ernest Scared Stupid. And I look at that film and it's like it doesn't match up with Friday the 13th or
Oh
Halloween,
god,
any of
no.
that hardcore horror stuff. It's in a subset of its own. And
It
this is
is.
where I feel like I would put this film where if I'm a kid and I don't know anything about this and being a parent and I want to show my kid this type of stuff because I love Friday the 13th, but a 4-year-old's not going to watch that yet. And I want them to start asking questions and kind of have a visual experience here, and they know nothing about Frankenstein or the Wolfman or the creature, anything like this. This is something I can put on, and they can have fun with it, and visually they will be entertained. So it's like I kind of came to terms with that as I was watching it. That I think there is a fan base out there that this may not resonate with, that love the Munsters from the 1960s. But for me, I truly believe that Rob Zombie went out to achieve that. He loved the original of the Munsters, and he's trying to make this for kids that are growing up now to be like, this is kind of what I want to go back and watch. Because, for me, being a Friday 13th fan, Jason Takes Manhattan, not a great film, but it was something that I watched all the time, and I can go back as a comfort blanket and watch it and say, okay, this is Jason for me. And I am a little lighter on that film than a lot of people, just because it's something I watched as a kid. So it's like I can see um a whole new group, a whole new audience kind of finding the Munsters, and then being, this is my Munsters.
No, that's actually a really good take on it. I agree with that a lot. I think that those tones are definitely there. This might offend some people, but like I would put this in the same league of that tone when it comes to like a Hocus Pocus or a Halloween Town, where it's like it is a great introduction. It gets you familiar with that imagery. So if you're a young kid, like this would be fun. And it is the furthest thing from what you've gone to expect from a Rob Zombie movie, man. Like I think back to Halloween 2, Richard Brake just fucking right after they smack into that cow, and he's just going fuck, 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 fuck. Like there's nothing like that. It's obviously. So it's like it is refreshing to see him kind of step back and do something, new, even though, like I said, I think that all in all, if I had to break it down to the simplest point here, because I feel like this is a complex review for us,
Yeah,
because, we do understand it, but to a general audience, they're not going to care to understand it. So it's one of those things where it's like, if you had to get my points out, is I think that the acting is pretty solid in this movie. I think that all of the actors are trying and they're playing it to a T. If this was like a stage play, or they're just hamming it up for that really 1960s kind of tone. So it's like everybody's kind of, it takes it, like I told you at the start of this, it takes an adjustment. It took me about 30 minutes of this movie to really kind of sit back and be like, okay, I'm used to this now. I can forgive it. We can keep going. This is just goofy, tongue in cheek. Because, like, yeah, it's pretty jarring to when people start delivering lines and just how cheap it looks. And I would say that, that's great. All the visuals look really nicely with the colors, the set design, everything looks great. But again, I just don't think it was shot well in the sense of the presentation. Like I think the shots are okay. Like they're just standard Rob Zombie shots at the end of the day. Like I saw a lot of the stuff that I'm used to seeing with his work. But like I think the biggest issue I have is that everything looks so clean and
yeah,
so modern behind the camera that it does kind of create this jarring effect of like, if you made this whole thing sepia tone or black and white, and you kind of messed with it and you gave it some grain, you gave it some stuff. If you shot this thing on 35 or 16 millimeter, even, and you really roughed it up, I think this would sell even better for people, because that would pull them out of this. You see something that looks so modern and everything, you're just sitting there watching it and going, God, this looks fake. Like this isn't really even selling it, which is again why I think you saying that this is like a stage play is like the perfect example I can give to Rob Zombie's The Munsters.
yeah. I see what you're saying. I think it feels a little too clean for me as well. Just everything in it. I mean, the visuals are not bad. Like going into some of the set design, the set pieces there. They're very vibrant. And I think honestly that's what he set out to achieve for the most part.
Mhm.
But I don't know. Like the performances, very exaggerated. I don't think I mentioned this yet, but it's like for me, I don't necessarily make that an X on the film, because it's kind of, I feel like that maybe that's what he was set out to achieve with that, where wanted the over exaggeration of the kind of like the play feel, because I don't think he's come out and said that wasn't the idea behind this. So until I hear different, I'm like it's so blatant and in your face that I feel like it had to be there. I mean, like if it wasn't, then that would become an X.
Yeah,
But I
taking
feel
it
like
any other
they're all on
way
the
would,
same page with it.
yeah, it would really be like a major slap in the face at that point if he comes out and says, "Oh no, this is me genuinely trying to make it look like a cinematic experience." Because like no, It's not that at all. It's unique, man. Like, I mean, we throw that word around a lot here. You've been saying experience film quite a bit the last few weeks, but like
Yeah,
again, we've kind of got
we're
these
coining phrases.
odd, yeah, we are. But it's like we kind of have these odd little experiences coming out like this year where it's like, and I know we're talking Jeepers Creepers, or I'm sorry, the Munsters, but it's one of those things where it's like I'm getting there. I said that too early, but like Barbarian is a unique, refreshing experience at the theater, and then we've got movies like this that come out, and it's not necessarily in the same vein of that experience, but it's different. There's nothing really like it right now that I've seen in a long time. And I think that it's one of those things where it's like that has to be somewhat applauded in some
Yeah.
sense, is that it is very different. It pulls itself away from what we're seeing right now and what we're used to. And I think personally, if it was just handled a little differently, I think this would turn into a cult film. It still could. It still really could. There could be people when this finally releases on Tuesday where it's like, hey, this is, a cult movie. Like a lot of people are going to love this maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the jury's out with that. I think this will find an audience. I think it
Mhm.
might be a little smaller than the usual Rob Zombie audience because this is something very different for him. I'm curious to see if this will resonate with a lot of hardcore The Munsters fans because again, I don't have that reference point. So I'm intrigued to see how that's going to be received in that community because I mean, Rob Zombie is a The Munsters fan, so I'm curious to see how his take was. Maybe I'll go back and jump into some of the original The Munsters. Maybe it kind of gets me into that space. I don't know. Do I think I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna watch this film? Not anytime soon, but it's
No.
something that I can see. Like I said, I watched Ernest Scared Stupid, and a lot of people are not going to go back and watch that movie ever. But like this one, I could see being a gateway film for horror for a lot of people in 20 years that are doing a podcast about horror.
So in like 3 to 4 years, you're sitting down with your kid and you're just like, hey, like maybe I got to start showing them some stuff. They have some interest. It's Halloween time. You see yourself maybe throwing this in that rotation over the month of being like, hey, here's another one that's just kind of fun and light and bright and you'll like it, kind of thing.
And that's where it's like that was a discussion where it's like this is something you can put on with a child who is 3 years old that you want to kind of really ease into that horror aspect of everything. And you're like, we're not ready for the Jason Voorhees yet. So let's kind of put this on. It's very light. There isn't, a lot of times some of the kids gateway horror tends to have adult jokes that maybe they're not going to get, and maybe some adult themes that they're not going to get. This doesn't really have that, I don't think, too much at all.
No, I
So
mean, like, there's a couple of like innuendos, things that'll go over kids' heads. But like, yeah, no, this is really, like I said, playing it
tame.
to its source material. It's
Yeah.
playing it to like being it was something that was made in the 1960s. Like it is very PG. It is very all like parties involved. So, and that's I again, to kind of its detriment, I feel like that might have been, you know, why this is purely, I think, going to satisfy Munsters fans or people who love that older content. I genuinely see even my grandparents putting this on and actually getting some enjoyment out of it because it'll probably remind them a lot of, what they're used to and everything and what they used to watch. So it's kind of one of those things where I'm just like, you're right. This is gonna be maybe a cult film because again, I'm not saying that this is a horrible movie. Like there's a lot of stuff. It's just so niche that I think that a lot of people are going to dismiss it.
Yeah.
And to an extent, like if I had to give it like kind of our to wrap things up here in a minute, like our scores of like we don't really give any like 1 out of 5s or A B C D. I just go off of like, was this something I would recommend for me? For the general audience, the people that are here to watch this review, I can't recommend the Munsters as a nothing more than, if you know what you're getting into and like this isn't going to be a great movie, then I would say you could watch this. But if you walked away saying I didn't care for it, I don't like it, I never want to watch it again, I'm not going to sit here and blame you. So like to me, this is more of like watch it at your own risk.
Yeah.
Understand the assignment before you go in and check this out, because it's not amazing, but it is not nearly as offensive as something like a Jeepers Creepers Reborn.
Yeah. In this one, looking at the trailer that initially dropped, we've had this discussion on trailers quite a bit now, where it's like sometimes they hide things and you don't really know what the film's about. Watching the trailer for the Munsters, what you see is what you're going to get throughout the rest of the film. There's no hiding here. If you've checked out during the trailer, you're probably not going to resonate with anything actually in the film itself. I mean, like for me, again, I said I came to a little moment of clarity halfway through the film. Um, so I started looking at it from a different lens, but overall, like for me sitting here, doing Splattercast and, the things that we are into and the things that we review, if I put it up against any of that stuff, this is not a good film at all.
No.
It's just not something that is ever going to work its way into my rotation regularly. But again, I don't see myself necessarily putting this up against something like The Black Phone or Barbarian. You have to be in a different headspace to watch
It
the
is.
film.
It's like you can't even put them in the same playing field,
Yeah.
because it's like this movie isn't trying to say that it is like one of those
This
movies.
is like I think this is PG, isn't it? So it's
Yes, it
completely
is.
different
And
than.
it knows exactly what it's trying to be. And like I said, to some people that's going to be great, to others that's the entire problem with this movie, is that
Yeah.
it is playing to what it knows it is. And for me it works in that sense, where it's just like, that is what I understand from this movie. But like, is this again something that I can say that I like you? Am I going to watch this very often? Probably not. It's not something that I see myself going back to and like really putting that in my rotation every year. But it is something where it's like, it's just not offensively bad. And I don't want
Yeah.
to come off here, because I know there's going to be a lot of people getting clicks and getting reviews by ranting and raving to the high heavens about how awful this is. But like, I just can't sit here and say that. Like, I'm not going to sit here and be like, it's that bad, because again, I'm looking at it from a different perspective than I feel like some others are. I feel like we both are, where it's
Yeah.
like we understand the creative intent behind this,
Yeah.
and we understand what kind of a movie we were getting into, and which is very rare for a Rob Zombie movie, I would say. It's like you kind of have an expectation, but sometimes, like especially with like Lords of Salem, he can twist that a little bit. But
Yeah. Well,
that's the
and that's where
gamble.
it's like, I look at it and I'm saying this is PG, where a lot of Rob Zombie stuff that's rated R, I'm way more harsh on, especially the Halloween remakes, because that's an R. You have to play to that audience. So you have to
Mhm.
play with the people that have already seen the original, new fans coming in that, want great storytelling and characters. You have to play to that audience. This is PG. This is a different audience entirely. Like I said, I do think he set out to try and make something maybe for that growing audience into horror, to say, maybe this is going to be my Munsters. This is something that I'm going to look back on 20 years and I can pop on and have fun with. Um, which, I think maybe he did achieve that. I mean, time will tell. But I could see a lot of kids that are 5 or 6 now that, randomly stumble upon this and their parents let them watch it on Netflix because it is PG, going back and revisiting this. This is might be a staple in their Halloween rotation uh, in 20 years, just because of that fact.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm very much in that same boat with you, where it's just like, I think that overall, if I had to really put my final thoughts into it, I think taking away from this film, I'm curious to see where it's going to be in a few years. I
Yeah,
want to know if this is going to be talked about, especially when this lives on Netflix for probably the majority, if not its entire life. Is this going to be something that, when we get into mid-October, we see on the trending tab where it's like, oh, more people are watching this. They're watching it around Halloween. Is that what gets them in the groove? Like,
yeah,
we'll see. And who knows if they come back to the Munsters again, whether it's Rob Zombie or not. I mean, this I'm sure we'll get a better understanding for how people think of this movie at that time. So,
yeah. Because it is such a vanilla story. You can put this on as background noise. So for the
mhm.
people that find a love for it, I could easily see that happening.
Oh yeah. All right, guys, but that's about going to wrap us up here for the Munsters. So yeah, definitely not the kind of review I thought I'd be giving. I was expecting us to kind of get on here when I started the movie and be like, it's bad, it's awful, it's just fucking trash. But I gotta say, it perplexed me a little bit. It's definitely something where it's like I can't sit here and rip it a new asshole, but I can't sit here and say, hey, go check it out. So that's kind of where I'm
That's
sitting with
kind of
this one.
there, very, very different thrill ride than I was expecting while I was watching this because my notes did say, "Hey, this is trash. This is horrible," and then and then about halfway through, I was like, "Meh," Ernest Scared Stupid's not a great film, but I watched it and I was like, this is fun."
It is what it is. But alrighty, guys, if you are interested and you like the review here, please hit subscribe. We are always trying to grow this puppy and get as many people in here as we can. We did recently hit our goal of 100 subscribers. So if you've already have subscribed and you're returning, thank you so much. And we love having you here. And definitely on this one, please let us know what you guys think about this movie when you do finally get to watch it. Is this something you're looking forward to? Is this something where it's been a few days since it's been out and you just want to jump in the discourse and let us know what you thought? If you hate this and you think we're just a bunch of hacks, let us know, because I
Yeah.
want all those opinions. You know what I mean? So it's just like, just please go off. But other than that, you can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at SplattercastPod, where we can keep up with us on all our little news bits that come through, conversation pieces, posts, all our horror loving art and fantasy and everything is on those little social media sites for you. And other than that, we do have a new Splattercast episode dropping tomorrow morning, so keep an eye out for that. And we just had the Sunday Scaries premiere this morning. A lot of great stories on there. That was a jam-packed episode, if I do
Oh
say
man,
so myself.
it was a wild ride. A lot of
Mm,
different things going on in the world of horror, and now we can add the Munsters to the list.
there we go. And then also keep an eye out for Tuesday. We'll be releasing our review of Smile. Let you guys know what you think of that one. So, alrighty, guys. I guess until next time, I'm Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
And remember, stay scared.